Title: My neighbor hasn't aged in 40 years, and I finally learned why. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins that I end this true horror story. You'll discover the chilling secret behind a neighbor who hasn't aged in 40 years. A quiet street, a familiar face, and a truth hidden beneath decades of silence. As the mystery unravels, you'll witness a darkness that should never have been uncovered. Stay with this story to the end, if you dare, and subscribe for more terrifying revelations. Some truths were meant to stay buried, surface tonight. The neighborhood had always appeared ordinary to outsiders, yet to those who lived there long enough, the uncanny became impossible to ignore. The most unsettling figure among them was the man known as Mr. Holden, who had lived in the same aging house at the corner for longer than many residents had been alive. He appeared no older than someone in his mid-40s, though older neighbors whispered that he had looked exactly like that decades ago. Time seemed to pass around him but never through him, as if he had been carved out of the very air that refused to let him wither. People grew uncomfortable when discussing him, choosing instead to treat him like a harmless mystery best left untouched. But for the narrator, curiosity had always been a quiet flame, and over the years that flame grew into something sharper and more dangerous. From childhood, the narrator remembered watching Mr. Holden tend to his garden at dusk. He worked only when the sun began its slow descent, never during the day, never in the bright hours when others mowed lawns or carried groceries. His movements were careful, methodical, as though every gesture served a purpose too delicate for ordinary understanding. He planted nothing that bloomed in color, choosing instead black-leafed shrubs, ashen vines, and strange pale flowers that opened only when the sky darkened. The air near his yard always held a damp scent, like soil freshly turned after a burial. No matter the season, no matter the weather, the garden thrived in unnatural silence. As the narrator grew older, fragments of rumor surfaced, whispered by elderly residents during block gatherings. They said Mr. Holden had moved into the neighborhood before the town even paved its main road. Photos from historical records showed houses rising, trees being cleared, roads being cut through empty land, yet in the background of several old photographs, there he was, standing among laborers who were long dead, looking unchanged. The narrator dismissed it at first, assuming tricks of the light or misidentified relatives. But the deeper they looked, the more impossible it became to deny the unsettling truth: the same face had appeared across generations. When the narrator turned 28, the unease became too strong to ignore. Something about the way Mr. Holden watched from his window, something about the way streetlights flickered only when he walked beneath them, stirred a persistence to learn more. The narrator began keeping notes, tracking his routines, observing the times he left and returned home. For weeks, the pattern remained unchanged. He stepped outside only after dusk, walked in slow loops around the block, and returned home shortly before midnight. His windows glowed with a faint amber light, the kind produced not by modern bulbs but old lamps burning low. One night, however, something shifted. The narrator noticed movement in Mr. Holden's backyard, a slow drifting shadow that did not match his figure. It swayed as though suspended in water. The narrator watched from an upstairs window, heart beating with a mixture of dread and fascination, as the shadow stretched, thinned, and disappeared into the garden soil. The next morning, the pale flowers appeared thicker, taller, radiant with a disturbing vitality. That was the day the narrator promised themselves to uncover whatever truth lay hidden beneath that garden. Research began small. Local archives revealed that the property had once belonged to a family who vanished without explanation. The house's deed passed from owner to owner, each disappearing or dying suddenly, until eventually the record simply listed "transfer by default," with Mr. Holden's name appearing every time. No birth certificate existed. No employment history. No medical records. The man was a ghost in every legal sense except that he walked, breathed, and tended his dreadful garden with unwavering devotion. The narrator's obsession deepened. Nights blurred into each other as they scoured library collections, old newspapers, and town folklore. One legend in particular echoed through many accounts: the tale of a man who bargained with darkness for eternal strength, bound to the land where the pact was made. The story told of a ritual that required nourishment, not of animals or objects, but of human vitality extracted slowly and invisibly over time. It was said that anyone living near the one who held the pact would feel drained, aging faster, while the keeper remained untouched by time. At first it seemed like nothing more than folklore, but the narrator recalled how many neighbors complained of feeling inexplicably tired, how often people moved away claiming the area felt suffocating. One rainy evening, the narrator decided to approach the truth directly. They waited until the sky turned black, until Mr. Holden had completed his routine walk and returned inside. The garden gate creaked softly under the narrator's touch, revealing rows of pale plants glistening beneath raindrops. The air felt thick, as though breathing required effort. Soil pulsed faintly, like something living just beneath the surface. Despite fear clawing up their spine, the narrator stepped deeper into the garden, guided by morbid curiosity. They examined the shrubs and vines, noticing how the roots twisted in impossible patterns, forming shapes that resembled grasping fingers. Some leaves bore faint impressions, almost like faces pressing from beneath the surface. The deeper the narrator walked, the heavier their limbs felt, as though the garden itself drained their strength. A low hum vibrated through the ground, rhythmic like a heartbeat buried far below. The narrator forced themselves to continue until they reached the far corner of the yard where a trapdoor, half concealed by vines, lay slightly ajar. A cold draft seeped through the opening. The narrator hesitated only a moment before lifting the trapdoor, revealing a wooden staircase descending into darkness. The air smelled of earth and something metallic, like rust mixed with decay. With trembling resolve, the narrator stepped downward, each creak of the stairs echoing in the narrow space. The walls were lined with old stones carved with unfamiliar symbols, all of them arranged in spirals pointing deeper inward. By the time the narrator reached the bottom, their breath had become shallow, and the feeling of being watched pressed heavily against the back of their neck. The room at the base was small, lit by a single lantern emitting the same faint amber glow seen through the windows above. In the center stood a stone basin filled with thick, dark liquid that moved even without disturbance. Surrounding it were faded photographs, each depicting a different family that had once lived near the property. Their faces appeared increasingly hollow in each successive image, as though life had been siphoned from them. The final photo showed the narrator's own family, taken years earlier, though they had no memory of it being captured. Dread swelled within them, but it intensified when they noticed footprints leading from the basin toward a narrow passage behind the far wall. They followed the prints until the passage opened into a round chamber where roots from the garden entwined across the ceiling like veins. At the center lay a mound of soil that pulsed with a faint crimson glow, and embedded in it were objects that once belonged to vanished neighbors, bracelets, keys, small trinkets that were never found after their disappearances. As the narrator stepped closer, the mound stirred. A slow realization dawned: the vitality drawn from those who lived nearby was channeled through the garden into this subterranean heart, sustaining the unnatural life of the man above. The soil responded to the narrator's presence with a shudder, as if recognizing new potential nourishment. Weakness spread through the narrator's limbs, grounding them in place. A whisperless pressure invaded their thoughts, urging them to surrender, to let the earth claim what it hungered for. Panic surged just as footsteps creaked above the trapdoor. Waiting, the footsteps above the trapdoor moved with a slow, deliberate weight, as though the house itself groaned beneath the presence descending toward the cellar. The narrators stood frozen, weakness radiating through their limbs as the mound's fading glow pulsed faintly, like embers refusing to die. The air around them tightened, compressing the space until each breath felt scraped from their lungs. The lantern's dim light stretched shadows into warped shapes that clung to the walls like living silhouettes. When the trapdoor finally creaked open, a cascade of cold air spilled into the chamber, announcing the arrival of the man they had feared for most of their life. Mr. Holden stepped into the room, his expression unreadable, his eyes reflecting the dim amber light. The garden's humming presence recoiled slightly, recognizing its keeper, though the faint tremors beneath the soil suggested that the bond sustaining him had been damaged. He approached slowly, his movements no longer fluid but strained. The narrator noticed how his skin, once smooth and ageless, had begun to dull around the edges, losing the unnatural sheen it had carried for decades. The vitality that fed him was dissipating. Something in the garden's subterranean heart had changed from the narrator's intrusion, weakening a system that had persisted far beyond human lifetimes. Mr. Holden stood beside the mound, his posture heavy. Though no words passed, the connection between him and the land was palpable. The roots suspended from the ceiling twitched faintly, reacting to his presence. But their tremors lacked the strength of before. Something vital had been disrupted. The narrator braced their weight against the wall to keep from collapsing. The exhaustion grew deeper the longer they remained in the chamber, as though the failing system now struggled to drain whoever was nearest in a desperate attempt to restore itself. The mound pulsed faster, erratically, its light dimming and returning in stuttering flickers. Mr. Holden pressed his hand to the mound's surface, and the soil responded like flesh, indenting beneath his palm with a sickening elasticity. The roots above lowered slightly as if awaiting instruction. But the moment he attempted to draw strength from the weakened structure, the mound quivered violently. Cracks rippled across its surface. The glow beneath it surged in a brief burst before collapsing inward, sending a low rumble through the earth. Mr. Holden staggered back, and for the first time, the narrator saw fear flicker behind his calm facade. The chamber trembled as the mound began to cave, releasing a rush of cold air from deep beneath the structure. The floor shifted, stones grinding against each other. The roots overhead writhed in panic. Whatever power had sustained him for so long was unraveling, the darkness he depended on slipping beyond his grasp. The narrator felt strength return in uneven waves, enough to pull themselves upright. They sensed an opportunity, though not one offering safety. The collapse of the mound did not signal freedom, it signaled something deeper awakening. The ritual chamber, designed to sustain an ancient exchange, now threatened to consume everything connected to it. The roots snapped in violent coils, flinging soil and debris across the chamber. Mr. Holden clutched the wall for balance as the floor beneath the mound cracked open, revealing a pit of swirling blackness. The air rushing from it felt colder than death, filled with whispers that pressed against the narrator's skull like claws searching for entry. The chamber responded to the failing ritual by attempting to rebind itself. The narrator felt invisible tendrils grazing their skin, pulling at their vitality. Across from them, Mr. Holden's face contorted, lines of age ripping across his features in rapid succession. His skin sagged, his hair dulled, and decades of time poured into him all at once, draining whatever remnants the collapsing system could salvage. He fell to his knees as exhaustion hollowed him. The house above groaned under the sudden shift, as though the entire structure recognized that its master no longer held dominion. The narrator forced their weakened body to move, inching toward the stairway. Every step felt like wading through dense, suffocating air as the chamber tried to reclaim the intruder who had disrupted its balance. Behind them, the pit widened. The mound disintegrated entirely, its glow shattering into sparks swallowed by the darkness below. Something stirred within the pit, not rising but spreading, an ancient consciousness leaking into the world like a flood from a broken dam. The narrator reached the stairs and clung to the railing. The roots lashed out once more, scraping the floor where they had just stood. Mr. Holden attempted to stand but collapsed again, his body frail, his vitality drained after decades of theft finally reversed upon him. His presence no longer commanded the chamber, it consumed him out of instinct, not loyalty. The narrator climbed the stairs with desperate resolve, pulling themselves upward one rung at a time. When they reached the top, the trapdoor shuddered violently under a sudden surge of air from below. They shoved it closed with all remaining strength, hearing the latch snap into place just as a rush of cold wind struck from underneath. The house creaked and buckled. The walls pulsated, reacting to the collapse of the system that anchored them. The narrator stumbled through the hallway, each step unsteady as the floor swayed beneath their feet. The lights flickered in strange patterns, not from electricity but from the dying glow of whatever force had long pulsed through the structure. By the time they reached the front door, the house emitted a low, continuous groan. Outside, the air felt impossibly still. The neighborhood lay silent beneath the dark sky, unaware of the unraveling horror beneath one of its oldest homes. The narrator backed away as the house's windows splintered inward, releasing a gust of cold air that carried faint whispers dissolving into the night. The ground trembled softly, then settled. No explosion followed. No collapse. The house simply quieted, becoming still and empty. The narrator stood in the street, breath trembling. The weight pressing on their chest gradually eased, though a soft resonance lingered beneath their skin. The connection between the chamber and the land had not vanished entirely, it had simply snapped free from the structure that once contained it. The house would never recover. And neither would the narrator. In the following days, workers boarded up the property. Officials declared the foundation unstable. No one spoke of the strange chill that lingered near the yard or the withering of every plant nearby except the pale flowers that somehow remained. The narrator passed by only once more and felt the same faint hum beneath the soil. A reminder that the ancient presence was not destroyed, only displaced. The cycle was broken, but the darkness was free. And freedom did not mean peace. If you made it to the end of this true horror story, remember this: some secrets don't disappear, they wait beneath the surface, hungry for the next curious mind. If you want more stories that dive into the shadows most people avoid, make sure you subscribe and stay with this channel. New nightmares arrive soon, each darker than the last. Thanks for watching, and sleep, if you can.